My name is Evan Carter. I'm 35 years old, and 3 months ago I stood on the marble steps of my parents' mansion in North Carolina and heard my father tell me, "You're not one of us, Evan, you never were." It was surreal. I'd just returned from a trip to Tokyo where I'd signed a multi-million-dollar deal to expand my logistics tech company into Asia. I should have been on top of the world. But instead I stood there frozen with my father's words echoing in my ears like a final verdict. "You're not one of us." This came from the same man whose mortgage I paid off. The same man whose heart surgery I'd quietly funded last year without telling him it was me. The same man who just weeks earlier had been bragging at his country club about his brilliant entrepreneur son, who was putting our family name on the global map. But I guess that was the problem. It all started when my younger sister Rachel announced her engagement. My parents Peter and Carolyn Carter threw a massive engagement dinner. It was less about celebrating Rachel and more about showcasing the Carter brand to their circle of doctors, judges, and investment bankers. That night, as I walked into their grand foyer with my wife Lila, I could feel the judgment already simmering. I wasn't wearing a tie, I wasn't clean-shaven. My wife was wearing a sleek black jumpsuit instead of one of those conservative cocktail dresses my mother prefers. We were outsiders, always had been. Rachel had gone to Princeton, then Wharton. She worked in private equity and was marrying the son of a state senator. Her name came with built-in respect. I dropped out of college after 2 semesters. I launched a delivery route optimization startup out of my apartment. Failed twice, was told I was wasting my potential, built it again, bootstrapped every dollar, ate instant noodles for dinner for 3 years. Now that little idea employs over 200 people and handles over $25 million in annual revenue. But at family events, I'm still the black sheep. The dinner went as expected. Champagne flutes clinking, catered seafood, and long-winded toasts. Then came my mother's turn. She stood glass raised and smiled that brittle smile she always wore when I was in the room. To Rachel, she began, who is everything we dreamed of in a daughter. Educated, elegant, ambitious, but never too much. Her eyes flicked to me, then away. "We're so proud to welcome another accomplished family into our circle. To legacies and to the future." People clapped. Lila squeezed my hand under the table. Later that night, I tried to offer Rachel a genuine congratulations. Despite it all, she was still my sister, but she looked past me and said, "Thanks, Evan. Just don't turn this into another story about your company, okay? This night isn't about hustle or grit." I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. That was the first crack. The second came a week later when I offered to cover half of the wedding costs quietly through my assistant. Rachel declined the money. My parents returned it through a cashier's check and a note in my mother's handwriting. "This is a family affair, Evan. It's best you attend simply as a guest. Not as a son, not as a brother, just a guest." Lila found me pacing on our porch that night, check still in hand. "They don't want your help because it reminds them you succeeded without them," she said. "You beat them at their own game." "I never wanted to compete," I muttered. "I just wanted to belong." That longing had always haunted me. Growing up, I was the odd one out. Rachel was the golden child, always prim, always praised. I was messy, curious, and stubborn. I liked breaking things to see how they worked. That didn't fit into the Carter mold. The last straw came when I overheard my father speaking to one of his business partners over whiskey in the study. He didn't know I was home early from a conference. "I don't know what he really does," Peter was saying, swirling his drink. "Something with trucks and computers. Sure, it makes money. But it's not respectable. Not like Rachel. Evan's not one of us. He never was." I stood there invisible in the hallway, every syllable cutting deeper than the last. I thought about all the times I'd paid their overdue taxes in secret. The family vacations I'd bankrolled. The wine cellar renovation that magically got approved when my anonymous donation arrived at the neighborhood council. And still I was the outsider. I left the house that night without saying a word. Drove back to Charlotte with Lila silent beside me. But that silence wasn't empty, it was full of something new. Resolve. The next morning, I called my lawyer and had every quiet payment I'd ever made traced and documented. Then I sent a simple message to my parents: "I'm done. The funding ends here, so does the pretending." How does the... 3 days later, the country club revoked their membership for non-payment. The mortgage company sent a reactivation notice. Their handyman canceled the remodeling project for their lake house. My father called in a fury. "How dare you?" I replied calmly. "No, Dad. How dare you?" My parents didn't reply to that message. Not at first. For weeks there was silence, not even a passive-aggressive email from my mother. And honestly, I expected some kind of retaliation. Maybe they'd go on a smear campaign across the family grapevine, tell everyone I'd gone unstable or ungrateful. But they didn't. They just vanished. Until the invitations started arriving. Not to me, no. To people close to me. My cousin Jess called one afternoon confused. "Hey, I got an invite to Rachel's wedding. But it doesn't list you or Lila on the RSVP list. That's got to be a mistake, right? I didn't know what to say. Then it hit me Rachel had cut us out completely. Lila got her answer 2 days later when her own sister forwarded a group email from Carolyn. It was a wedding itinerary. At the bottom, in plain text, it read, "Please be advised, Evan and Lila will not be attending." No context, no explanation, just an erasure. That stung in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't just exclusion, it was exoi. I sat on the porch that night, Lila next to me, our dog curled at our feet. The sky was pale orange, the air thick with late summer humidity. I kept thinking about how many things I'd let slide for the sake of keeping the peace. How many times I'd smiled while swallowing my pride. How many holidays we'd driven out of our way to attend only to be ignored or corrected or dismissed like children who'd wandered into a grown-up conversation. They don't get to do this anymore, I said aloud, not realizing I was speaking until Lila looked at me. Her hand found mine. Then don't let them, she said. Take your story back. The next morning, I canceled all remaining financial ties. I closed the joint trust fund my father had long forgotten was in my name. I stopped the automatic transfers to their retirement portfolio, something I'd been quietly supplementing since their accountant flagged some bad investment choices 3 years ago. I sent them one final email, polite but cold. It ended with, "From now on, if you need help, you'll have to ask." With honesty, I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The silence broke in a way I never expected through Rachel's fiancé. His name was Andrew. He was a political golden boy, the kind who knew how to wear a watch that cost more than a car and still make you feel like he was one of you. I didn't know him well, but we'd spoken once or twice at family events. He always seemed distant, polite, but guarded. So when he emailed me directly, I was stunned. "Subject I think you should know." He didn't mince words. Apparently Rachel had told him I'd been cut off from the family because of an emotional episode and financial blackmail. But after seeing some paperwork my mother had left out bank statements showing years of payments from my LLC, he started asking questions. Rachel deflected. My father told him I was unstable, overly dramatic. But Andrew wasn't stupid. He found the receipts, the hospital invoices I'd paid, the monthly auto debits for their utilities. He even found my name on the ledger for the down payment on Rachel's first apartment. "I don't know you well," he wrote, "but I thought you should know the truth has a way of leaking out no matter how deep they try to bury it." That message hit me harder than it should have. Not because I needed Andrew's validation, but because for the first time in my life, someone inside that world saw me. Not as a fluke, not as a disgrace, but as someone who had quietly carried more weight than anyone realized. I didn't reply to him. I didn't need to. Rachel's wedding came and went. We didn't attend. Instead, Lila and I spent the weekend hiking in the Smoky Mountains. We woke up early, climbed until the sun painted everything gold, and made coffee on a rock ledge while fog rolled over the valley. It was the first wedding weekend in years where I didn't feel hollow inside. The calls started 2 weeks later. First came Aunt Janice. Her voice syrupy sweet, the kind she used when pretending not to stir the pot. "So strange that you weren't at Rachel's big day, Evan. Everyone noticed. I heard Carolyn say you were traveling, but it sounded more like exile than vacation." I didn't bite. "Hope you had a good time, Janice." Then came Uncle Dean. Then family friends. Then my old high school friend Trevor, who now worked at my dad's firm. "Man, your dad's been in a mood. Thought it was about the stock market, but I overheard him ranting about you in the break room. Something about betrayal and ego. Sounded messy. They weren't just trying to push me out, they were rewriting the story. I could have fought back. Could have posted the screenshots, the financial trails, the emails. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned into silence. Momentum Digital hit a new record that month. We secured a government contract for emergency routing systems, something I'd been chasing for 2 years. I moved our team into a bigger space, hired 4 new leads. My days were full of motion, of energy, of possibility. But the nights were still heavy, because as much as I hated to admit it, part of me still wanted a call. Just one. From my father or my mother. Something real. Something that said, "We see you, we were wrong." That call never came, but someone else did. One evening just after sunset, I was locking up my office when I saw a figure waiting by my car. At first I thought it was a client, or maybe a lost delivery guy, but as I got closer I recognized him. It was Rachel. She looked tired, smaller somehow, her makeup barely hiding the red around her eyes. "Evan," she said. Just my name, like it was a question. I didn't say anything, just waited. "I didn't know about the payments," she said. "The apartment, the student loans." I didn't know. They told me it was Dad's investment returns, that you were doing fine but still floundering. I studied her. The girl who had once laughed when I spilled soda on my laptop at 16. The woman who had become a polished product of our parents' expectations. "I didn't come to fix things," she added. I just wanted to tell you that I know now. I'm sorry, I don't expect forgiveness. I just couldn't keep pretending. I nodded. That was all I could offer in that moment. Then I said the only thing that felt true. You're not the one I needed to hear that from. Rachel's visit stayed with me longer than I wanted to admit. She hadn't asked for forgiveness, hadn't begged for reunion, and maybe that's why her words carried weight. For the first time, someone in my family hadn't tried to manipulate the truth, they'd simply acknowledged it. That night, I sat on the porch with Lila, the same spot where months earlier I'd made the decision to walk away. The autumn air had a bite now. We held our mugs like anchors. Do you think they even know how much damage they did? I asked, not really expecting an answer. No, Lila said softly. But I think they're starting to feel it. The next few weeks were quiet. Almost too quiet. My phone didn't ring. No cryptic emails. No back-channel gossip from extended family. But sometimes silence isn't peace. Sometimes it's a pause before something heavy lands. And it did unexpectedly and with the subtlety of a hammer. A letter arrived. Not an email. A physical letter. Cream-colored envelope. My name written in my mother's tight cursive. I stood by the mailbox, heart already tight. Lila walked up behind me. What is it? The next move, I said. Inside was a single page. My mother's handwriting neat and controlled. No greeting. Just a statement. We are struggling. The accounts have run dry, your father is not well. Rachel's support is limited as she is starting a new life. We don't expect you to forgive us, but we do need help. If not for us, then for the family name. We cannot let everything fall apart. I read it twice, then a third time. No apologies, no accountability. Just desperation dressed as duty. Lila waited quietly while I stood on the porch, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. I didn't feel rage, I felt empty. Like someone had come back to a house they'd burned down and asked to borrow a blanket. They still think the name matters more than the people who carry it, I said. Still think legacy is worth more than truth. That night, I drafted a response. I didn't send money. I didn't promise anything. I just wrote plainly. You can't build a legacy on silence or shame. I won't rescue what's never protected me. I mailed it without rereading. That was the only power I could offer them now, my refusal to rewrite the truth for their comfort. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. It was my father. Evan, he said, voice lower than I remembered. Slower, too. I didn't speak, I waited. Your mother, she's not handling things well. Still, I said nothing. I didn't call to beg. Or argue, he added. I just thought you should know we sold the house. We're moving to a smaller place, one of those retirement communities. The words came flat matter of fact, but underneath them I heard it the sound of a man who had lost control of the world he'd built. I won't say I handled things right, he added. But I wanted to tell you, you were right. About a lot. My breath caught for a second. It wasn't a full apology, but it was more than he'd ever given. And I asked softly. There was a pause, then, and I'm sorry. I closed my eyes, let the words settle like dust. I wasn't sure what to feel of relief, anger, grief. Instead, I just said thank you. We hung up soon after. No promises to reconnect. No plans to visit. Just two men with too much history and not enough words to bridge it. That weekend, I took Lila to the mountains. We hiked in silence for most of the day. The air was clean, the trees on fire with fall color. At the summit, I looked out over the valley and felt the weight of something I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years finally lift. I'm not angry anymore, I told her. She turned to me, eyes warm. Then you're finally free. Back in Charlotte, the company was thriving. We secured another major contract this time with a European transport firm. I flew to Berlin to finalize it. The CEO there, an older woman named Ingrid, pulled me aside after the meeting. Your proposal was sharp, she said, but it was your story that convinced me. The way you've built something honest, it shows in your people. It struck me then how far I'd come. From being the son who wasn't enough to being the man others trusted with their vision. 2 weeks later, Rachel called again. This time her voice was steadier. Andrew and I are moving to Boston, she said. He got a spot at the Kennedy Institute and I'm transferring. Good for you, I said, and meant it. There was a pause. I just wanted to say, I hope one day we can rebuild something. Not because we're family, but because we might still choose each other. It wasn't a demand, it was a hope. And that made all the difference. I smiled, maybe one day. After we hung up, I sat on the back porch, the dog curled at my feet, the evening air thick with the scent of pine. Lila came out barefoot, 2 mugs of tea in her hands. We didn't speak for a while, we didn't need to. Not all healing comes with fireworks or big declarations. Sometimes it comes like this quiet, slow earned. That night, as I watched the stars rise, I realized something important. It was never about getting my parents to change, it was about finding the strength to stop needing them to. The thing about healing is it doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it's quiet and lonely. Sometimes it feels like you're walking barefoot across gravel. Each step hurts, but there's no going back. That's where I found myself as winter settled in. It had been months since the call with my father. Rachel was gone, moved to Boston. The family house was sold. I never asked where they moved. I never needed to know. Momentum Digital had opened its Miami branch. Lila and I flew down to oversee the final touches interior glass walls quiet pods for engineers. A mural of the first mock-up I'd ever drawn on a napkin back in 2000. The place buzzed with life. My team thrived. We were building something that mattered, something resilient. And still in the moments between meetings and jet-lagged dinners, I found myself wondering if they ever talked about me now, not with bitterness, but with reflection. One morning, I was walking down the beach with Lila. The tide was low and the sunrise was pulling pink and gold across the water like silk. I watched her laugh at a gull chasing a foam cup, and I thought, this is the life I built. This woman this morning, this freedom, it all came from choosing truth over tradition. You ever think you'll see them again? She asked, tossing the question like a shell into the surf. Sometimes, I said, but not because I need it, only if it's real. She nodded. That was our rule now. Nothing forced, no obligatory ties, only honesty. Back home, I started mentoring a group of high school entrepreneurs through a local program. Every Thursday night, I met a room full of kids who reminded me of myself, restless, brilliant in their own offbeat ways, none of them fitting into the neat boxes school kept trying to cram them into. There was one kid, Marcus, 17, soft-spoken but sharp. He'd built a prototype for a delivery system using drone technology. Nothing fancy, just PVC pipe and modified motors, but it worked. One night after the session, he stayed behind. You think my dad will ever respect this? He asked, eyes fixed on his hands. He keeps telling me to quit and focus on real skills. I smiled, not because I had an easy answer, but because I knew that question in my bones. Maybe not, I said gently. But one day it won't matter if he does. He looked up confused. Because you'll respect it, I said. And that's the respect you'll need the most. He didn't reply, but I saw something shift in his posture just a little, like a weight had moved. That night, I sat in my office, lights dimmed, thinking about that moment. How often we let ourselves be ruled by people who don't even understand the things we're trying to build. How long I'd carried their judgment like a shadow even after stepping into the sun. A few days later, Rachel texted me, "They're not doing great." I stared at the message for a while, then typed back, "Are you asking me to step in again?" Her reply was fast. "No, just thought you should know." I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. A week passed, then another. One afternoon as I was leaving a lunch meeting, I got a call from an unknown number. Again. I hesitated, then picked up. "Evan," the voice said. It was my mother. I stopped walking. "We're in town," she said. "Just for a few days. We're staying at the Magnolia Inn." I said nothing. "I know we don't deserve a visit," she continued. "I just wanted to let you know, in case you wanted to stop by." I didn't agree, but I didn't hang up either. "Okay," I said, voice flat. "Noted." That night, I told Lila. She paused mid-sip of tea, eyes scanning my face. "Do you want to see them?" she asked. I shrugged. I don't even know what I want anymore. I just know I'm not going there looking for closure. She nodded. "Then don't go for them. Go for you." It took me another day to decide. When I finally walked into the Magnolia Inn lobby, I felt like a tourist in a life I'd already left behind. The front desk clerk pointed me to the cafe. I saw them sitting at a small table by the window. They looked older. Smaller. My father's hands trembled slightly as he stirred his coffee. My mother's hair was pulled back tighter than usual, like she was trying to hold something together. They stood when they saw me. I stayed seated. No hugs, no smiles, just silence. "You look good," my mother said after a moment. I gave her a curt nod, thanks. More silence. Then my father leaned forward. "I was wrong," he said simply. "About how I treated you, about what I said. I thought success had to look a certain way. Yours didn't, so I dismissed it." He looked at the table, then back at me. "But what you've done, it's more than I ever did, and I see that now." My mother cleared her throat. "I was afraid," she said. "You made choices I didn't understand, and I didn't know how to love what I couldn't control." I took a breath, let it settle in the space between us. I'm not here to fix anything I said, and I'm not here to pretend the past didn't happen. They nodded, no protests, no excuses. I finished my coffee and stood. "I wish you peace," I said, "but I need mine too." Then I left. Back in the car, Lila waited. She didn't ask what happened. She just reached over and held my hand. We drove home in silence, the kind that feels full, not empty. That night, I stood by the window watching the moonlight spill across the floor. For years, I thought family was about loyalty, about staying even when it hurt. But now I understood family isn't about blood or obligation, it's about choice. And I had finally chosen myself. Winter passed slowly. Charlotte slept under gray skies and bare branches, but inside our home, something was blooming. It wasn't loud, it wasn't sudden. It was quiet. a steady warmth that crept in with small things. Waking up without dread, cooking dinner just because, leaving my phone in another room and not checking it for hours. The kind of peace that only comes after a long storm. Lila and I had stopped talking about my parents, not because we were ignoring it, but because it no longer held power. The visit at the Magnolia Inn had closed a chapter. No apology could rewrite history. But hearing them speak without venom, without performance, had cracked something open. Not a door, just a window. And I didn't need to climb through it. I just needed to breathe on my side of the glass. Momentum. Digital continued to grow, but I stopped chasing it the way I used to. I stopped running from something. I started moving towards something else. I began turning down deals that didn't align with our values. I met with schools, community centers, small-town mayors, people trying to solve real problems with no budget and even less hope. I started to fund the Carter Initiative, ironically named. It focused on tech accessibility in rural counties. We installed high-speed internet in forgotten places, taught kids how to code, paid their travel to science fairs and robotics competitions. I didn't put my name on the press releases. It wasn't about legacy anymore, it was about impact. One Friday evening, I was locking up the office when I noticed Marcus again. The high school kid with the drone. He was waiting outside, jacket too thin for the cold. "You busy?" he asked. I smiled. "Depends." He pulled a small box from his backpack and opened it. Inside was a rebuilt drone, compact and sleek. I added thermal sensors. It can find missing hikers now. I partnered with the sheriff's office. They gave me a grant. I stared at it, then at him. "You did this." He nodded, then added quietly, "You showed me how." I didn't know what to say. I reached out, closed the box gently, and handed it back. "Keep building," I said. "Don't stop for anyone." Later that night, I told Lila about it. She was curled up on the couch with her tea, the dog asleep beside her. She listened quietly, then said, "Maybe you were meant to be the root, not the fruit." I looked at her confused. "You weren't meant to impress the tree you came from," she said. "You were meant to grow something completely new." That stayed with me. 2 weeks later, Rachel called again. She was pregnant. The news caught me off guard, not because I didn't expect it, but because of how calmly she said it. "I want you to be in his life," she said. "I want him to know your story." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. For a moment, I imagined a boy with her sharp eyes and our mother's fire. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. I just said, "Tell him the truth. Don't make him earn your approval." "I won't," she promised. Spring arrived early that year. The trees bloomed in fast, bright bursts like they'd been holding back too long. Lila and I spent more time in the garden. We grew tomatoes, basil, peppers. Her hands in the soil were like therapy for both of us. Every weekend we invited neighbors over for dinner. Real friends. People who never cared about my resume or my bank account. They asked about books, movies, jokes, not spreadsheets. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had anything to prove. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, I found the old business plan I'd written at 23. The one I'd printed at the library, hand-bound in a flimsy blue folder. Pages worn, corners curled. I sat on the floor reading it. There were ideas I'd long forgotten. Features that never launched. Goals I'd already surpassed 10 times over. And yet, there was something sacred about those pages. Not because they were genius, but because they were mine. That night, I told Lila I wanted to frame one page and hang it in the office. She smiled, not at the idea, but at the boy she could still see in those words. The boy who kept going. In April, Rachel and Andrew visited Charlotte. She was 6 months along, glowing in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or money. We met at a park near our house. She brought a sonogram photo. I brought 2 coffees and a blanket. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't rehash old fights or drag up scars. We talked about names, diapers, schools, life. "I think I want to raise him different," she said. "No performance, no pressure." I nodded. "Then you already are." That evening, as I watched them drive away, I felt something subtle shift inside me. A loosening. Like a thread that had been pulled too tight for too long had finally been released. I walked back home barefoot in the grass dusk, settling in like a soft exhale. Lila met me at the door. "You okay?" she asked. I pulled her into a hug. "Yeah," I whispered. "I think I finally am." Summer came like a tide that never left. Charlotte shimmered in heat and sunlight, long days stretched out like lazy promises. Our garden flourished. The basil reached knee-high. The tomatoes fell heavy on the vine. Even the neighbors' kids came over to water plants and chased the dog through the yard. The world felt slower, but it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Momentum Digital celebrated its 10th anniversary in June. We rented out a rooftop downtown, simple, nothing flashy. No step-and-repeat banners, no champagne pyramids, just people. Team members brought their families. Clients flew in. There were speeches, yes, but none about me. It was about the work, the journey, the grit. I stood in the back, plate in hand, listening as our lead designer told a story about failing her first campaign and how that failure shaped her into who she was now. People laughed, clapped, nodded. That was the legacy I wanted. After the party, I drove home alone. Lila had taken her own car, needing to stop by the studio where she was curating a new exhibit. I rolled the windows down. Let the warm wind fill the car. On the radio, a song from college played, one I used to loop during late-night coding sessions when I was just trying to believe in something that didn't exist yet. The memory didn't hurt anymore. It felt like a souvenir from a place I no longer lived in. A few days later, I got a letter. Not from my parents, from my uncle, my mother's older brother, Alan. We hadn't spoken in years. He lived in Oregon, had always been a bit of a rebel himself, though a quieter one. The letter was short. He'd heard through the grapevine about everything that had happened. I just wanted to say he wrote that walking away from where you came from doesn't mean walking away from who you are. I think you've done something most of us were too scared to try. You built your own ground. I folded the letter and slipped it into my desk drawer, right next to the framed page from my first business plan. Some words don't need to be displayed. They just need to be kept. Rachel gave birth in late July. A boy, Theo. I didn't visit the hospital. She didn't ask me to. We both understood that closeness couldn't be forced, but she sent a photo the next day. Theo wrapped in a soft green blanket, sleeping like he'd never known the world could be cruel. Underneath the photo, she wrote, "I hope he has your courage." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply, not yet. Sometimes love is slow, sometimes it takes the shape of space, not presence. My parents didn't call again. I didn't expect them to. Their silence no longer felt like punishment, it felt like distance. Like the final mile of a long trail that didn't need to be retraced. And I didn't carry bitterness anymore, just memory, just lessons. One Sunday morning, I was sitting on the porch steps watching the sun climb over the tree line. Lila came out with coffee. She sat beside me, quiet shoulder against mine. "We're different now," I said. She didn't ask what I meant. She never did. She just nodded. "I used to think forgiveness was something you gave," I continued. "But maybe it's something you claim. For yourself. So, it doesn't live in your bones anymore." She smiled. "Then take it. It's yours." I closed my eyes, breathed deep. The air was thick with honeysuckle, the kind of scent that clings to memory, and I let go. In the months that followed, we traveled. Not to escape, but to explore. Lisbon, Kyoto, Vancouver. We lived out of 2 backpacks and a camera bag. I kept a small journal, nothing profound. Just notes, sketches. Quotes I overheard in cafes, I wrote like no one was watching. Back home, I shared some of those entries at a local writing group. They asked me to publish them. I declined. It wasn't meant for shelves, it was meant for breath. One evening in early fall, Marcus invited me to his college send-off. He'd gotten into MIT. Full ride. His parents were stunned. They thought he was wasting time on toys. Now they beamed at every guest like they were the ones who soldered his first prototype. At the party, he pulled me aside. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever stop doubting?" I thought about it. The question didn't deserve a pretty answer. "No," I said. "But the doubt gets quieter, and you get better at not listening." He nodded like that was enough. That night, driving home, I realized how many parts of my life I once thought were broken had simply outgrown their original shape. I wasn't unfinished. I was unfolding. In November, Rachel sent a video, Theo laughing for the first time. No caption, just joy. I watched it 3 times, then replied with a single line, "He's going to change the world." She sent back a heart, and that was enough. On the last day of the year, Lila and I hosted a bonfire in the backyard. Friends gathered. There was chili, whiskey, blankets and guitars. Someone passed around slips of paper. "Write something you're releasing," they said, "then burn it." I wrote one word. Approval. I watched it curl and blacken in the flames. Watched the smoke rise like a prayer I no longer needed answered. Later that night, long after the embers had died and the guests had gone, Lila and I stood in the quiet. The stars were sharp above us. The house behind us glowed warm and steady. "We're home," she whispered. I took her hand. "No," I said. "We built it." Story 2. "We all agreed you must pay $50,000 for the wedding," my mom said coldly. "If you don't come back to this house," my dad added. I smirked, canceled all the deposits I had made for the wedding, and cut off all financial support. By morning, 35 missed calls and 1 message turned everything upside down. The wedding was called off. "I appreciate you being with me today. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Wherever you are, if you could let me know in the comments the city or nation you're viewing from and what time it is there, that would be greatly appreciated. Let's start our story together now." The old house always smelled faintly of my mother's rose-scented potpourri and my father's pipe tobacco, a combination that used to mean comfort. But now looking back feels more like a carefully constructed delusion. For many years, I've been Matthew the good son, the reliable one, the unseen pillar. As my best friend Mark once dryly put it, holding up the family facade. It started early. The sacrifices. I remember being 22. My own fledgling tech startup finally showing a flicker of promise. I just secured a small round of seed money. Enough to rent a tiny office, maybe hire an intern. The air in my cramped apartment had crackled with possibility, the scent of cheap coffee and instant ramen. The fuel of dreams, a constant companion. Then came the call. Dad. Frank, his voice tight with a forced nonchalance that always signaled disaster, had made a misjudged investment. That was his term for losing nearly everything in a scheme that had "can't fail" written all over it in invisible ink. My seed money. Every last cent went to bail him out. The bitter taste of that sacrifice dream swallowed down with lukewarm coffee as I stared at the anemic balance in my bank account still sours my memories. I can still feel the rough texture of the cheap office chair I never got to use for that startup. A phantom limb of a future I'd given up. Was it naive of me to think love could be earned through endless giving? Perhaps a few years later, it was my younger sister Sarah. She'd gotten into a good university and I was genuinely proud. But then Mom Helen decided Sarah needed a semester abroad in Florence for her resume. Think of the culture, Matthew. The exposure. She chirped, her eyes gleaming with a vicarious ambition that had little to do with Sarah's actual desires. So while Sarah reluctantly Instagrammed her way through Italy funded by my second job, I was back in my small apartment. The aroma of instant ramen, a familiar ghost. Counting pennies to make sure she could afford that authentic gelato Mom insisted she try. The constant loans for car repairs for new appliances when there's unexpectedly broke for that down payment on the very house I was now being threatened with exile from, a house where my name wasn't even on the deed. Despite my significant contribution, all blurred into a continuous drain. It wasn't just the money, it was the expectation. The unspoken assumption that I would always be there to pick up the pieces to smooth over the cracks. I remember once at a family dinner tentatively suggesting a more conservative approach to their spending after a particularly tight month. Dad just grunted from behind his newspaper, the crinkle of the pages a dismissal in itself. Mom had given me a sharp, disappointed look, Matthew dear. She'd said, her voice laced with a saccharine condescension that always made my skin crawl. Leave the grown-up decisions to us. I was nearly 28 then, so when Sarah announced her engagement to Liam Preston, I felt a surge of genuine joy for her. Liam was a good guy, quiet, steady, from a family that was comfortably well off, but refreshingly didn't feel the need to advertise it. The Prestons were solid for Sarah, who often seemed to float untethered in the whirlwind of our parents' expectations. Liam was an anchor. The initial wedding discussions were deceptively calm. I offered what I thought was a generous sum, $10,000, something I'd carefully budgeted for. That's a start, dear, Helen had said, her smile tight, a little too bright. Frank just nodded vaguely. Already looking bored, Sarah, however, visibly relaxed, a small, grateful smile gracing her lips. It was a fleeting moment of normalcy. Soon, Helen was in her element, dominating every conversation, her voice rising with excitement as she name-dropped. Expensive venues and social caterers. Her new hallmark phrase became only the best for my daughter. I observed Liam grimace a few times during these brainstorming meetings, a look of great pain passing across his face before he'd brush it over, clearly attempting to be polite, deferring to Sarah and, by implication, to Helen. You're the family man, Mark had commented plainly over beers one night after I detailed Mom's newest fantasy for a champagne fountain. He'd always seen through them, my faithful no-nonsense friend. When are you going to cancel the account? I shrugged it off, but his comments lingered, a splinter under the skin. Then came the family gathering. That's what Mom called. It felt more like a summoning. We sat in the formal living room, a place rarely utilized, kept for special visitors or allegedly ambushes. The air was dense with an unsaid tension that vibrated across my skin. Sarah sat on the edge of the old recliner, tearing a paper napkin with restless fingers. With a calm, even royal voice, Helen started. Everyone has agreed. With her eyes sweeping over us but still lingering on me, she said that a wedding worthy of Sarah, and to be honest, worthy of the Prestons, would cost $50,000. My blood froze. $50,000. I started to say something, but she interrupted me. And you too, Matthew, she said. It will be covered by her eyes like ice chips. Frank and my father, seated in his wingback chair, nodded in stoic assent. Your mom is correct. The arrogance of it is that we have been overburdened for years by supporting this family. It was stunning after everything I had put into them. Shock struggled against a surge of rage. 50,000. I controlled my raspy voice. You know I can't just mom and dad. I've made 10 offers already. For me, that's a lot. After everything. The recitation of previous sacrifices stuck in my throat as I drifted off. As though someone had wrapped my lungs in barbed wire, my chest constricted. I looked at Sarah. The torn napkin in her lap was the object of her intense gaze. She refused to look at me, tears in her eyes. The deepest wound was Sarah's quiet. Matthew, stop being so theatrical. Helen said, her voice cold and abrasive. It's your responsibility. A nice son acts in this manner. Consider your sister. Consider the reputation of the family. Frank bent over. A fierce light in his eyes replaced his folksy manner. When he wanted to establish absolute authority, he would always utilize this threat, which was his hallmark. Make a payment. You're no longer welcome, Matthew. You will never be able to enter this house again. Then a peculiar serenity descended upon me. The sort that follows a hurricane that has torn away all that is familiar. One unpleasant realization came after years of suppressing my own needs, swallowing and harboring animosity. My lips formed a sour grin. It was not laughter. It was the somber realization that I had been losing a struggle for years that I could no longer escape. It was this, the tipping point. And I knew what I had to do when I saw their unwavering, eager expressions. They were unaware that the pillar was ready to collapse. I left the residence. With a sound of gloomy finality, the huge oak door behind me clicked shut. Frank's booming their ultimatum reverberated in the abrupt silence of the suburban street forever. Mom's prize-winning roses, which are often a source of pride for the neighborhood, had a cloying, almost funereal aroma. All of a sudden, the house where I had grown up felt strange, even though every brick and shingle was familiar. Like an indictment, every family photo I could think of was displayed on its walls. Mark's bachelor house across town usually had a subtle scent of freshly laundered clothes and pizza. Knowing that he didn't ask any questions, he just led me to the worn sofa and poured a cool drink into my hand before opening the door before I had even knocked. In the whirlpool of my feelings, the bottle's clink on my teeth served as a tiny, jagged anchor. I took action later that evening, propelled by a powerful combination of Mark's silent encouragement, righteous rage, and 2 more drinks. With deliberate clicks, my laptop shone in Mark's living room's low light. I started to take down the financial support system that I had provided for my family for many years. I made a provisional deposit of $1,000 on a moderately priced neighborhood location for Sarah. Lost. I had planned a consultation about catering. Helen had been looking into a florist that specialized in 5-foot centerpieces, but her elder brother canceled, thinking I was just being helpful. I was careful to take my name off of the list of possible contacts. It was like cutting a wire in a complicated, stifling network with every email sent and online form filled out. The most significant and fulfilling was going into my bank account and terminating the shared emergency credit card. The one that has experienced more emergencies than a VR season was available to my parents. My fingers shook a little as I verified the action, not out of fear, but rather because it was so bold. The unadulterated, strange taste of taking back my own strength. Ultimately, I composed a brief, forceful text message that lacked the emotional appeal they had anticipated. To Sarah, Dad, and Mom, in accordance with your need, I'm not going to pay the $50,000. As a result, I have canceled all of my scheduled donations and will permanently stop providing any non-essential financial assistance. Please don't get in touch with me about this anymore. I banned their numbers after that. Silence was what I needed. I needed air free of their demands so I could breathe. The emotional burden of it all fell. Then a shiver of fear. What had I just done? Sadness for the family I believed to be mine. Or the family I so much want, anyhow. However, behind it, a brittle seedling of freedom started to sprout. An hour later, Mark saw me clutching the remote control as I was just looking at the blank TV screen. He remained silent. Simply place a comforting touch on my shoulder. My phone, which I had unlocked out of a somber feeling of duty, was a battle zone the next morning. 35 calls were lost, a dozen voicemails. At first, there was a sugary fake worry in Mom's voice. Are you okay, Matthew, honey? We were somewhat anxious, swiftly progressed to manipulating tears. Your sister's heart is being broken by you. How could you have been so mean? Then Frank's texts arrived, a stream of barely disguised threats and thunderous rage. Boy, you'll regret this. You'll return with a stutter. Their dysfunction was a symphony. My phone buzzed once more just as I was ready to reblog them. Another relative followed by an unidentified number. Definitely. I was sent to be guilt-tripped into submission by the flying monkeys. I choose to disregard them. When they showed up, I was robbing myself to switch the phone off entirely. On Mark's doorstep are my parents. Bless his soul, Mark was waiting for them at the door. His 6-foot frame served as a strong defense. From the living room, I could hear them raising their voices as Helen made a passionate appeal for her bewildered and unfortunate daughter. Frank's tirade on family responsibilities and respect. Mark was adamant. He told them to go since I wasn't accessible in a steady, quiet voice. They didn't go in silence. From the street, I heard Helen call out my name. Frank yelled something about my being an ungrateful bastard as her voice broke with dramatic sadness. It was a relief to hear their automobile rip away. I put my head in my hands and sunk into Mark's couch. It was this, the full-scale conflict. I felt empty within. Gazing at the dark TV screen at my reflection, a stranger with a terrible expression on his face and weary eyes. If I wasn't their son, then who was I? Their protector against the terror of complete isolation. A chilly knot in my gut was cast out. This was the lowest point of my life. The time when the false sense of family was so completely destroyed. I had no idea what was remained, if anything. Then, in the thick of my morning's chaos, Sarah sent me a single text message. It was a fresh number, not one of the blacklisted ones. Most likely the phone of a buddy. Something forced me to open the delete button even though my finger was hovering over it. Matthew. They're crazy. This is not what I ever wanted. It was all Mom. The wedding goes horribly wrong. Liam is going crazy. I need you, please. Everything was perverted by them. Give me a call. Severe skepticism fought against urgent perplexity. Was this just another ploy? One more trick, however the unadulterated fear in her text. It felt different, the utter desperation. Felt authentic. A tiny, cautious flutter went through my heart, a foolish, optimistic organ containing a tiny bit of something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Perhaps the final remnant of fraternal love. I consented to meet her at a peaceful, unassuming park away from curious onlookers and listening ears. On a seat beside the duck pond, Sarah was waiting. Her normally bright eyes were swollen and red-rimmed, and she appeared little and pale. She started crying again as soon as she spotted me. She came running to me, not in a hug, but as though she was looking for cover. Matthew, Her voice was husky as she coughed out. Everything is in disarray. A terrible, terrible mess. I paid attention. Crossed arms. She unburdened herself while keeping a close distance, and the narrative came out in a flood of heartfelt confessions. Helen's constant demands her fixation with looks and the way she disregarded Sarah's own more modest wedding suggestions. After everything Liam's family had, Mom insisted. We can't make Sarah seem bad. Consider the impact we must leave. Sarah wiped the back of her palm across her eyes as she cried. As usual, Frank had been the passive facilitator, nodding in agreement with Helen's lofty declarations. Sarah had received coaching on how to approach me and explain the $50,000 demand as a choice made by the entire family. Persuading her that it was anyway due to her would not bother me. She said that she had been afraid to confront them. She is caught between her fear of our parents' fury and her devotion to me. They gave me the impression that I was betraying them if I didn't comply. She colored her cheeks and murmured in humiliation. She said that the severity of the money demand and her parents' actions appalled Liam. Although he was well out of his league, he was supportive of her. It was now reasonable for the Prestons to ask some probing questions about why the venue had phoned them out of the blue regarding a canceled deposit. Naturally, Helen blamed me for everything, portraying me as the bad guy who was destroying Sarah's happiness and the family's reputation, all by myself. She even displayed a series of texts from her mother to me. As I listened, each one was a masterclass in guilt and manipulation. Something odd occurred. My heart, which had been hardened by years of bitterness and recent betrayal, started to melt. Only a bit. I recognized another victim of our parents' unrelenting narcissism, rather than a co-conspirator. My innate need to protect my little sister returned. Now, however, it was tempering it with a hard-won prudence. In the dappled sunlight of that peaceful park, a tenuous alliance started to take shape. An implicit knowledge that we were both entangled in the same poisonous web. But might we collectively figure out a means to escape? In a sea of family strife, the park seat seemed like a little remote island. Something deep within of me had changed as a result of Sarah's honest and heartbreaking revelation. My struggle was no longer the only one. Sarah, the truth, has a way of making things right. I spoke in a gentler tone than I had meant to, or at the very least demonstrating who is truly on your side. You must be very open and honest with Liam and his parents." She hardened her stare and nodded with a new resolution. Later that day, Sarah told Liam everything as I texted her reassuring words. Every phrase her mother used to manipulate her, every nod from her father, and every bit of her own shame and terror. To his credit, Liam didn't recoil. He was taken aback, furious on her account. But Sarah was his top priority. Together, they made the decision to go up to the Prestons, who turned out to be quiet, honest folks. They listened to Liam and Sarah with patience. Their faces were becoming more serious. Sarah subsequently told me that although they were personally horrified, they kept up a public front of tactful, careful concern. The immediate result was a little but important halt to any future wedding-related commitments on their part. Already, Helen's great event was on the verge of collapse. Helen and Frank were sent into a greater panic by this change, this unified front from Sarah and Liam and the Prestons' calm manner. Aunt Carol subsequently told me that they referred to a larger family gathering as a council of war. Naturally, I wasn't invited. According to a sympathetic relative, the plan was to formally paint me as unstable, self-centered, and the only cause of the family's present problems. They wanted to mobilize the army, put Carol under tremendous pressure, and totally isolate me. Despite Helen's social rise and Frank's bravado, Dad's younger sister had always been the odd one out. She was there at that meeting. Hear their meticulously constructed account of my alleged wrongdoings and her long-dormant suspicions come to a head. She gave me a call a few days later. Her voice was a balm warm and straightforward. "Your parents are telling a story that's taller than a redwood," she observed to Matthew. "I've always known that Helen could plaster a house with unpaid IOUs to maintain appearances, and that Frank had a tendency for big endeavors. Avoid letting them affect you." Then she related a half-forgotten anecdote about a key breadcrumb that had been deliberately covered up a substantial amount of money that Frank had lost in a surefire investment around 10 years prior. My parents' push to make amends for Sarah persisted in the meanwhile, albeit subtly through embarrassing messages from cousins and worried voicemails from distant aunts. It was a well-planned attack meant to exhaust me. I was leaving my workplace one day when I was accosted by Frank himself. He seems rushed. His typical air of self-assurance was conspicuously lacking. He took a fresh approach, combining his customary subliminal warnings with a pitiful appeal. "Your mother is a complete mess, Matthew, son. Sarah is wretched. Just make this right, for adherence to family." His breath had the odor of desperation and old coffee. "There's a cost to my commitment, Dad." My voice was fairly steady as I spoke. "It's known as respect. It's not for sale either. Not for $50,000 in particular." He was spluttering on the pavement as I left. My terror became more with each tiny act of resistance. It is replaced by a distinct, icy resolve to batia. Equipped with Aunt Carol's details and an increasing feeling of urgency, I began my investigation, with Mark's assistance. He was adept at using internet resources, and his sound skepticism helped to counterbalance my emotional distress. I started assembling a financial jigsaw using scanned copies of checks and previous emails I had kept. In retrospect, it seemed oddly common that I had written them for urgent medical expenditures or roof repairs. I recalled that I had been making monthly contributions to a joint savings account that had been established years prior for their future security. I felt a chill of fear when I eventually got the statements online. Over the course of the previous 18 months, thousands of dollars had been carefully siphoned out in little frequent withdrawals where security should have been. There was a huge yawning emptiness with no notes or explanations. My secret comrade Sarah did her part. She would seem to want to make up with her parents, while secretly searching for any records that would support Aunt Carol's account. Anything pertaining to that particular investment, including old bank statements and correspondence. She was playing a dangerous game. She told me the atmosphere in their home was heavy with unspoken worry and quiet, passionate disputes behind closed doors, and that the continual fear of discovery was a heavyweight. Ever more solemn, the Prestons stepped up their courteous pressure. They told Helen and Frank that they were becoming increasingly concerned about the ugly family strife and the obvious ambiguity surrounding the wedding's financial plans. According to what Sarah told me, Helen even attempted to ask Mrs. Preston personally for a modest bridging loan to tide things over for the deposits, but she was met with a calm, courteous, but distinctly firm rejection. Sarah claimed that Helen's terror had increased noticeably. She started acting strangely. She makes more frantic attempts to manipulate Sarah. The formal letter then arrived, appearing on thick cream paper and subtly implying unmet financial commitments to family members and the possibility of legal action. It was obviously a form of intimidation, perhaps written by a low-level legal associate of Frank's. Initially, I felt a shock of dread, but it soon turned to rage. Mark suggested that I take it to a sensible woman, a good lawyer. With a little contemptuous grin, she glanced at it. "Matthew, this is amateur hour," she added. "It's meant to frighten you. Not much more," however, she said, her face growing grave. "Having everything organized and recording every dime you've ever donated to them wouldn't harm." One rainy Tuesday, the last piece of the puzzle, regardless of how informal the agreements were, clicked into place. Sarah described her tone as an anxious, whispered whisper. I discovered it in a locked box in Dad's old desk, Matthew. Like in the espionage film we saw, I picked the latch. She detailed a pile of documents that included aggressive red ink demands for payment, threatening letters from a secondary lender, and a loan agreement for an astounding sum that was taken out than a decade ago, with an interest rate that was nothing short of predatory. There was a huge balloon payment due date approaching. A shiver went down my back. It was this: the covert plan. The secret terrible debt had resulted from Frank's surefire investment's disastrous failure. They were about to go into default, most likely going to lose the house. Sarah's wedding wasn't the main reason for the $50,000 they asked for from me. It was a last-ditch effort to avoid financial collapse. The extravagant wedding served as a smokescreen, a means of upholding appearances, and maybe a devious attempt to somehow financially connect themselves with the wealthy Prestons through Liam. A tight, bitter rage hardened in my stomach. This went beyond simple greed or entitlement. This was a deliberate, protracted lie that had endangered not just my financial security, but also Sarah's future and the stability of the entire family. Strangely enough, though, there was a peculiar sensation of peace underlying the wrath. The peace that comes from knowing the whole awful truth at last. The serenity of knowing. The indisputable proof was in my symbolic hands. I knew precisely what I was going to do next since the game had shifted. Reconciliation was not the driving force behind the decision to have a monomatal confrontation. At the depths of a very deep ocean, that ship had sailed sunk and turned into an artificial reef. This was about closure and the truth, about taking the curtain off their frantic, ornate stage show. I meticulously planned it. It was their house, the living room, in which the ultimatum had been given. My understanding of the meaning was intact. Sarah. Was there anything about her that I had never noticed before? A quiet strength? Liam was standing beside her. He was a strong, steadfast support. My silent advocate, Aunt Carol, consented to attend, an impartial observer whose honesty no one could doubt. And in a brilliant move, Sarah had made sure the Prestons would be there as well by carefully crafting the invitation. Under the pretense of a last candid conversation, they had been asked to clarify the wedding plans and guarantee openness for all concerned. Their own need for clarification was demonstrated by their acceptance. It was thick enough to spread over toast the air in the living room. The Prestons were sitting beautifully in the old chairs I'd once helped Dad restore, and Helen and Frank were sitting rigidly on their flowered sofa, looking nervously at them. The atmosphere was heightened by my mother's pitiful attempt at normalcy, putting out the nice china for coffee. Her potpourri's aroma was oppressive. I started off coolly, even holding a little folder of papers in my hand. I recalled the ultimatum and the $50,000 demand. Frank's neck flushed and he began to bluster. "Look here, Matthew. Rehashing is not necessary." "Yes, Dad, I believe there is," I said, looking straight ahead. I looked across at Sarah. "Did you voluntarily consent to my paying the whole $50,000, Sarah?" Sarah's voice was crisp and shockingly forceful as she addressed our parents directly. "No, I felt under pressure. It was assumed that Matthew wouldn't mind according to my parents. They gave me the impression that I was powerless." Clutching her pearls, Helen let forth a dramatic gasp. I then laid each card down individually. The joint savings account copies, declarations demonstrating the regular withdrawals, emails describing how I had previously helped them out financially in times of need. The piece de resistance comes last. Copies of the secondary lender's menacing letters. The loan contract with its punishing interest rate is proof that they are about to default. I even created a tidy summary graph and used my laptop to show it onto their large-screen TV. Helen's labored breathing was the only sound to break the utter quiet in the room. "This $50,000 demand this wedding." My voice echoed with a chilly clarity as I spoke. Sarah was never really the focus, was she? Sarah's marriage to a wealthy family, a lifeline and a last-ditch effort to utilize my money to spare you from 10 years of your own terrible financial choices. It appeared that Frank expelled all of the air. He muttered that he didn't want to bother us and that he wanted to protect the family. It was pitiful. But Helen gathered her signature. Outrage erupted. "You dare?" Her voice cracked as she screamed. Your parents, how dare you blame us following everything that we have done for you? But she didn't do well. The audience was too perceptive and the evidence was too glaring and damning. Mrs. Preston, a mask of cold contempt covering her face. Helen finally spoke. Frank. Her voice was calm, yet it was full with unquestionable judgment. This is really disheartening. We value Sarah and Liam's candor in exposing this upsetting circumstance. Mr. Preston just nodded while staring at my parents with what could only be characterized as complete disdain. Their quiet censure had greater impact than any yelled charge. The Prestons' obvious contempt was what ultimately shattered Helen. She lost the poise she had worked so hard to build. She broke down in bouts of self-pity rather than regret, lamenting how unjust everything was and how they had been harmed. Then Liam got up and put a shielding arm over Sarah. Sarah and I will not participate in any more deception, he said resolutely. In the company of individuals who truly care about us, we will be organizing a lot more straightforward wedding that we can finance on our own terms. After expressing their brief detached condolences to Sarah and Liam, the Prestons rose, excused themselves with a glaring disregard for my parents. It was awful that they left. The oxygen that was left in the room. The lavish wedding. Helen's masterwork of financial desperation and social rising was dead and buried. After giving me a little sign of approval, Aunt Carol left, leaving Sarah, Helen, Frank, and myself in the wreckage. My parents had to deal with the fallout from their deeds, the societal shame, the impending debt, losing their children's respect forever. There were no sincere apologies, just misdirected blame and muttered justifications. There was a tacit agreement between Sarah and myself as we left that house together into the cold afternoon air. We both looked at one another with anguish, certainly, but also with deep, tired relief. This was the end of an era, and she and I both knew it. I stated unequivocally that financial links will never be restored. If there was to be any further communication, it would be on completely different conditions based on honesty and respect. Commodities. In a few months, they had demonstrated their insolvency. Later life had settled into a new cadence. I had made an investment in myself by enrolling in the advanced certification course I had put off for many years. My tiny flat, which had started off as a place to sleep, was beginning to seem more like a home with things I enjoyed rather than items purchased to impress people or serve a need. Sarah and I had a closer bond than before, rebuilt with mutual support and a clear understanding of the reality. In a friend's garden, she and Liam enjoyed a lovely, low-key ceremony that was full of fairy lights, laughing, and sincere happiness. Carol was there, beaming, and it was all a wedding ought to be. Of course, Mark was my best man. With its lingering aroma of tobacco and flowers, the house where I grew up was now merely a structure. It contained memories both happy and sad. But I was no longer under its control. The calm, steady power of self-respect gradually overcame the occasional twinge of grief I still felt for the family I wished I'd had the unconditional affection I'd yearned for. It needed walking through fire to find the serenity that came from setting clear limits. However, I discovered my own ground. Setting limits with those who are meant to love you without conditions can occasionally be the most difficult. The people you've spent your entire life pursuing for approval. When family becomes the cause of your greatest suffering, what do? The shackle that imprisons you. I decided to keep myself safe. Freedom was my choice. Which option would you have selected? Story 3, I'm Marcus and I'm 32. And my family members would definitely characterize me as quiet if you asked them to. Not in an introspective, enigmatic manner. Just the one that never truly takes up space, never raises his voice, and never creates trouble. As if I were a domestic utility, my mother has a tendency of referring to me as the assistants. With a half smile, she says it, as if she's pleased. However, her tone is always contemptuous, as if she were talking about a coffee table that had been for ages. Beneficial, recognizable, and simple to forget. Except when it gets in the way. The golden child wasn't me. Melanie, my younger sister, played that role. The professional attention getter who may wind up on the family Christmas card cover after blinking at a camera. Then there was Jared, my elder brother, loud and charismatic. He never paid for his own alcohol and always had a tale to tell. Me, I'm employed in data analysis. Live by yourself, no drama, no children, just a good credit score and a clean refrigerator. My cousin Emily got engaged a few months ago, which is where this narrative begins. Now, Emily and I don't really get along. At one point, she called me the person who works with computers or numbers or whatever. However, she invited me to a fancy downtown restaurant for her engagement dinner. The email list under +1 optional if you can find someone had my name. Emily Classic. I did, however, RSVP yes. There was a part of me that hoped things may be different. My folks would be present. Along with a few aunts, uncles, and other relatives, Jared and Melanie were also there. Most of them I hadn't seen in months. I reasoned that it would be courteous to show up. My ex used to claim that I looked like a CEO in training when I wore the blue blazer. I saw right away that everyone was sitting when I got there. Not all of them, actually. One seat remained vacant. It was a tiny crooked bar stool, the sort where the light flickers between the staff kitchen and the lavatory door. Waiters are constantly rubbing trays against your back, and the air has a little industrial soap odor. My mother waved Marcus over here when she saw me. She made the call and then added her loud stage whisper, which she employs to make it sound like she's kidding but isn't. Take a seat. It is near the exit. In this manner, you avoid damaging any pictures. A few people looked around. Behind her wine glass, my sister laughed. Jared grinned. My father continued to munch without raising his eyes. I stood there for a while, taking everything in without saying a word. Then I approached Drew out the stool and sat silently. I attempted to feel the heat in my cheeks to keep cool during supper, folded my napkin gently and grinned at the waiter. I didn't say much. The discussion drifted around me and I just listened. Announcements of a baby wedding preparations and tales from Jared's most recent vacation to Cancun. I was pleased of a predictive model I created for a significant logistics firm when I attempted to comment on a recent assignment. Wow, exclaimed Melanie, blinking. That sounds complicated. The conversation suddenly turned back to Jared's recent tattoo. A toast to Emily and her fiancé was once made by a family friend. Clinking glasses, my chair swayed. I felt like a piece of furniture, just a solid foundation. Jared ordered 2 rounds of drinks for the table and I watched. Without checking the price, my dad ordered the chef's special. The server was requested to package 3 additional desserts for my mom to take home for later. The check then arrived. In the center of the table was a sleek black folder. After a moment of hesitation, the waiter shouted it right in front of me. Everyone fell silent. Slowly, I raised my gaze. Melanie gave a blink. Jared's eyes were fixed on his phone. My mother remarked, "You don't mind, do you?" while clearing her throat. "You always handle money so responsibly." I added calmly, "Don't worry, I wouldn't dare ruin the symmetry of your check either," as I leaned back in my wobbly little stool. Then I got to my feet. Nobody made a move. Melanie hissed, and I heard it. "Even so, what does that mean?" she muttered. When Jared did glance up, he whispered, "Dude, chill." However, I had already started to go toward the entrance. I didn't bid them farewell. Didn't turn around. Simply strolled outside into the cool evening breeze. Behind me, I could hear the noises of muted disputes starting to bubble. It was not the first time such an incident has occurred. Something about that moment, but not even near. About the expectation, about the stillness. The fact that nobody even asked if I should cover everyone's expenses. It struck in a different way, and I sensed a change for the first time in my adult life. Not rage. That's right. Not even grief. Just a calculated finality, silent. It's like turning the final page of a book you've been reading for years out of duty. I didn't immediately return home. Rather, I strolled 2 blocks to a little 24-hour diner that had a fragrance similar to pancake syrup and burned coffee. The type of establishment that didn't give a damn about your identity or attire. You only requested a booth and perhaps a few refills. I opened my phone, got a black coffee, and sat in the corner. Mom had already texted messages in the family group chat. "Marcus, that was impolite. At least you could have made an offer?" Jared sent a text. A very sophisticated dude, leaving us dangling in public like that. Melanie sent a text. "Be less theatrical." After one supper, nothing happened. Nobody expressed regret, nobody claimed to understand. Just a silent hope that I would be the one to assist again. The simple one. They may make fun of it. In the same sentence, lean on and disregard. For several minutes, I gazed at the screen. I looked at something else after opening my banking app. While Jared was taking unaffordable holidays and Melanie was sharing unpacking hauls from expensive labels she couldn't pronounce, a healthy savings account had been meticulously accumulated over the previous 10 years. Alone in silence, I had been constructing something solid. Perhaps though it was time to cease being so silent. I began plucking threads the following morning. I started by removing Jared as an authorized user over the phone with my credit card provider. 3 years earlier, when he only required a short-term bump to the score, I had promised to do him that favor. He had earned thousands of dollars from streaming services. Takeout and bar charges, although he consistently claimed to be working things out. On the line was my name, no more. I then went to the family's Netflix account and signed in. Indeed, the billing profile had the name of whom and mine. Thus, I modified the password. Next is the family plan for Disney Plus Spotify. Amazon Prime was shared. I took back one by one the items that they had sloppily thought belonged to everyone but actually belonged to me. The big one came next. You see, I had consented to co-sign a modest business loan my parents were taking out to grow my dad's landscaping firm around a year ago after much begging on their part. They couldn't be approved by the bank alone. With my signature, it went through even though that credit had inconsistent income. Not even a thank you letter was sent to me. I recalled the provision that permitted a co-sign owner to start a liability review during the first 12 months of that loan, which was still in its early phases. Technically, it was legal if fraud or misrepresentation could be proven, but it was uncommon and hidden in fine print. Thus, I engaged a lawyer. It wasn't even about bankrupting the company or ruining their credit. I had no desire for vengeance, not in the sense of watch and brimstone, Distance, legal, financial, emotional, and a fresh start were what I desired. In the meantime, the texts continued to arrive. Mom sent an SMS. Your father's dream is this. Don't let a dinner check ruin it. Melanie sent a text. Are you really interrupting us because of a single offensive joke? Jared sent a text. Regarding this, you're acting like a little girl. Adult up. The best one, however, was when Emily, the soon-to-be bride, left me a voicemail 2 days later. Marcus, hello. I've heard that the dinner became tense. I wanted to inform you that the wedding guest list is currently being finalized. We're going to have to decline your invitation because there isn't much room. I hope you get it. Click. No shock, no anger, just some clarity. That gave me the last push I required. I launched a private browser window and began researching something I had been secretly hoping to do for years. Relocating actually means going to a different state, not just a different neighborhood. Perhaps even outside the nation. Somewhere I wasn't required to be a supporting character in someone else's narrative. I might just be Marcus somewhere. I sent one last message to the family group chat later that week. No threats, no explanations. Just please remove me from any future financial obligations or shared accounts. All access has been revoked. I wish you the best moving forward. Melanie left a thumbs down emoji. Jared replied, LOL, okay, my mom didn't respond at all. I waited that Friday. My dad called, I let it ring out. Then he texted me. Can we talk about the loan thing? It's urgent. Then Jared called, then Melanie. By the time Monday rolled around, I had 17 missed calls and 4 emails with subject lines like, family emergency, please call, and we need to resolve this ASAP. But I was already 3 states away, sipping a hotel coffee and watching the sunrise from a balcony I'd paid for with my own money with zero guilt. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. They weren't just mad, they were scared. And the best part, I hadn't even played my final card yet. I spent the next 2 weeks in Asheville, North Carolina. It was supposed to be a pit stop, a breather before I figured out my next move. But the crisp mountain air and quiet pace suited me. The silence from my family didn't last long. It started with guilt. Mom sent an SMS. I just don't understand why you're punishing all of us. We love you, Marcus. Families argue. It doesn't mean you run away. Then it turned manipulative. Melanie sent a text. I hope you're happy. Dad's losing sleep over this. Jared's credit score dropped. And don't even get me started on Mom. She's sick with worry. And finally, when none of that worked, came the fury. Jared sent a text. You seriously think you're better than us now? You think money makes you important? You're just a bitter little worm who got lucky with a boring desk job. That one actually made me laugh. It was so on brand, so cartoonishly predictable. I nearly spilled my coffee. Meanwhile, the fallout was growing behind the scenes. Remember the business loan I co-signed? My lawyer had uncovered that they had misrepresented their projected income and fabricated some invoice totals. That alone didn't trigger legal action, but it did flag the loan for reassessment. When the bank caught wind, they initiated a formal review and froze access to the remaining funds until it was sorted out. That meant the renovation project, they'd started new trucks, new office space, some flashy landscaping equipment was now half finished and hemorrhaging cash. My dad had tied up their savings into the expansion without access to the full loan. They were in trouble. I knew all of this because one of my cousins, Erica, had quietly reached out. She wasn't part of the engagement dinner drama. She'd been traveling for work but heard the stories flying around the family group chats. She called me one night and said, okay, I've stayed out of it long enough. What actually happened, Marcus? Because they're making it sound like you went full villain. So I told her everything. Not in a rant, not with fury, just facts. What they said, what they did, how they treated me like a wallet with ears, how, after years of being their backup plan, I finally said no. There was a long stillness on the line. Then she added gently, "I believe you, and I'm sorry I wasn't there." We spoke for an hour. It was the first meaningful chat I'd had with a family member in months. That didn't leave me feeling smaller when we hung up. I spent a lot of time staring at the ceiling and felt something I hadn't felt in years, yet I didn't weep. Observed. The wedding followed. Emily's. Even with the previous uninvite, my mom's Gmail still occasionally forwards emails to me. Last-minute information. Registry connections. Seating charts have been updated. I suppose no one had considered taking me out by hand. I learned that Jared was making a toast in this way. I made a final attempt when Melanie was a bridesmaid, and my dad was paying for the photographer's premium package. A calculated low-key joke. As you can see, Brian Emily's fiancé is employed at a mid-sized computer business in marketing. He has ambition, out loud. Additionally, I recently learned this after a little LinkedIn research. I'm also looking for a new position at my organization. For a job that was only 2 teams over from mine, he was really 2 rounds into the interview process. The way the cosmos presently plays its cards is funny. I was not trying to ruin his chances. I made a point of bringing it up in a call with HR even though I didn't have to. Due diligence is more important than gossip. "Hey," I remarked nonchalantly. "Brian Jenkins is in the last stages then, just so you know. We have socially crossed paths. It's only a familial link, nothing major. He may recognize me as the reserved one. However, complete disclosure and everything." HR acknowledged it and thanked me. That was it. Not a drama. Don't push. However, it indicated that they dig, and what they would discover. Particularly the appearance of his name on some of Jared's more colorful postings on social media. They might even halt. This fool slipped on the bill and set the family loan on fire, especially the one earlier that week when Jared sent a grainy picture of me from a wedding years ago with the message. Some folks, I suppose, were destined to be letdowns. Melanie Emily was tagged, Bryant, public, no filter. I didn't have to do any work, Asheville again. At last I signed the lease for a modest yet contemporary flat with a view of the river. Quiet neighbors, spotless walls, and plenty room to stretch and reflect. On the morning of the ceremony, 2 days prior to the wedding, I moved in. I had 15 missed calls when I woke up. Then Erica sent the text. "You won't believe what transpired at the reception just now." And I grinned as I opened the message and saw what she had written. Nor a gloating smile, nor a mean one. It's the type that happens when the scales begin to balance on their own. Erica's message was brief, hurried, and exuberant. An hour prior to the ceremony, Brian was taken from the wedding. When she arrived, a woman from his company, HR or something, asked to have a private conversation with him. The next thing I know, he's sweating through his shirt, pacing wildly and talking on the phone. Emily lost it when her mother claimed that they were having a professional disagreement. She locked herself in the bridal room, shouted, and tossed her bouquet at him in front of the makeup artist. Extra champagne is being used to stall the visitor. Jared is attempting to defuse the situation, but you know how that works. Not because I was shocked, but rather because of the lyrical symmetry, I nearly dropped my coffee mug. I took a seat at my kitchen table, read the letter 3 times, and then just laughed quietly and completely, not out of retaliation, but out of relief. Emily's wedding was not ruined by me. I didn't ruin Brian's work. I just took myself out of the picture and let their dysfunction to take my place. As it happens, Brian failed to disclose certain significant information on his job application, such as his history of exploiting company resources for personal endeavors, such as producing wedding promotional content for Emily's expanding influencer program during business hours. Even worse, his social media presence has begun to cause internal concerns due to Jared's foolish posts. Erica's follow-up messages indicate that before extending his offer, HR had raised concerns about the matter and requested clarity right away. As they say, timing is crucial. However, the wedding still took place. It was kind of 2 hours late. At last, the ceremony started. Erica, who had access to gossip at the level of a maid of honor, said that Emily had calmed down sufficiently to walk down the aisle. Throughout her vows, she never smiled and her eyes were crimson. She needed constant reminders from the photographer to appear joyful. During the processional, Brian was clearly frightened and spoke to Jared in an agitated whisper. He even dropped the ring at one point. "I'm not even kidding." The gathering then proceeded to Lorne. My parents were present, naturally sitting in the center and acting as if nothing was wrong. My mom had a tight, Botox-like smile on her face. Apparently, my dad kept looking at the exits as if he thought someone might show up at the party. Nobody did. However, I did upload a picture that night. Nothing noteworthy. It's just me in my new apartment with a stack of books next to me, a cup of coffee in my hand, and the Asheville skyline in the distance. It was a straightforward caption. Sometimes peace appears like a one-bedroom in a sealed door. I tagged. No one said nothing else inside an hour. Melanie liked it, then unliked it, then liked it again. The week following the wedding, I got a parcel in the mail. No return address. Inside was a little envelope, the sort used for elegant invites. Inside that was a handwritten message. I'm sorry, I got it now. No signature, but I recognize the penmanship. It was Emily's. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Over the next 3 weeks, the communication slowed. My mom tried once more, this time gentler. I miss you. Things haven't been the same. But I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because the weight of those words no longer meant what she believed they did. Missing me only mattered if they ever actually saw me in the first place. Jared went silent after that. Maybe someone finally informed you that publicly trashing the person who used to pay your credit card wasn't the wisest option. Or maybe he finally understood I wasn't coming back. Melanie Surprise contacted out 2 months later with a photo of a damaged light and a short statement. Okay, I know why you barred us from the Prime account. Just tell me where you acquired this light. I adore it. I provided her a link. That was it. No further talk. Just a clean, respectful discussion between two grown-ups who have learned how to keep their distance. As for my parents, well, I heard from Erica that they were suffering with the business. Turns out, without the whole loan and with numerous payments already overdue, they had to downsize. My dad sold off 2 vehicles. My mom ceased her weekly salon sessions. The expansion plans were halted indefinitely, yet they survived. They always do. People like them, people who assume the world owes them merely for existing, don't fall in a single spectacular blast. They dissolve slowly, silently, until one day they look around and all the individuals who used to hold them up are just gone. And me, I'm still in Asheville. I picked up hiking, got into photography. There's a bookshop around the corner that conducts open mic evenings, and I've even read a few essays. They're tales about boundaries, about choosing yourself, about the quiet power of walking away. No one in the crowd knows they're about my family. No one has to. A few weeks back, a woman came me afterward and mentioned that one about the restaurant that hit. I've been that person at the table. I grinned and just responded, yep, me too. That's the problem. I didn't require retribution. I didn't have to create a scene, shout, or turn the tables. I only needed to step away from the table and let them handle the money.